All right, so today we're going to dig into a case that's, well, it's pretty disturbing. It's the story of Kenneth McDuff. He was a killer in Texas. And this case goes on for decades. What's crazy is it's not just about the crimes themselves, but also all the ways the justice system seems to mess up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we've got court transcripts, we've got witness statements, news reports, the whole shebang. And we're going to try and put it all together, make sense of it. So we're talking multiple murders here. Death sentence overturned, parole granted, nationwide manhunt. It's a lot. Are you ready for this?
You know, what really gets me about McDuff's case is it shows us some big problems. In the justice system, especially back then, Texas prisons were packed.
Yeah.
And there was so much pressure to give people parole.
Okay, so let's go back in time. August 1966,
Yeah.
Everman, Texas. A farmer finds something awful. Two teenage boys, Richard Bond and Matthew Duncan, they're dead in the trunk of a car.
And the murders. Brutal. They were shot point blank right in the face. It was clear this is a cold-blooded killer.
Enter Kenneth McDuff. His accomplice, this guy, Roy Green, tells this crazy story. McDuff already had a violent past, and Green says they were driving around. When McDuff sees these teenagers with a girl, her name was Laura Smith, and McDuff tells Green, "I want to find a girl to rape and kill," and he threatens Green to stay quiet.
Green's testimony is really important. He was part of it, sure. But he tells us how McDuff made these kids get in the trunk. At gunpoint, Green was young. He thought McDuff was just trying to scare him.
Yeah, but it gets worse. They drive to this remote spot. McDuff pulls Laura out of the trunk and then shoots both boys right in the face.
This is where we see how planned out this was. This wasn't on impulse. McDuff meant to do this. He made Green part of it, too.
And the horror doesn't stop there. Green tells us how they drove further out. Laura's still in the trunk. McDuff rapes her, then makes Green do it too. Then he strangles her, kills her. They dump her body and try to vanish.
So the police start figuring things out. They find Laura's body a few days later. McDuff gets arrested at his girlfriend's place. And during the arrest, they find evidence. The victim's wallets and McDuff's shirt covered in blood.
Seems like an open and shut case, right? But then McDuff's mother gets involved, tries to defend him, says it was all Green's fault. It's like that motherly instinct gone wrong. But the jury doesn't buy it. They find McDuff guilty, and he gets the death sentence.
But hold on, there's a twist. It's 1966. A few years later, the Supreme Court makes a huge ruling. Furman v. Georgia, it was called. It basically said the way the death penalty was being used, it was unconstitutional. And that stopped executions all over the country.
So McDuff, who killed 3 people, gets his sentence changed to life in prison. It's crazy the system that was supposed to punish him gives him a chance to get out one day.
And that's what happened. 1989, Texas prisons are overflowing. So much pressure to give parole. After 15 denials, McDuff gets out. The guy they called the baddest boy in Texas walks free.
People were terrified, especially in his hometown. The police, the ones who put him away before, they knew he would kill again.
One officer even said, sooner or later, young girls, young boys, they're going to turn up dead. It was like a chilling prediction.
McDuff stays quiet for a bit, but then, 1991, 2 women vanish. One of them, Valencia Joshua. They find her body behind McDuff's college dorm. Sound familiar?
It's classic McDuff.
Yeah.
Like his signature move, he preyed on women, used force, and then dumped their bodies quickly. It was obvious the monster was back.
Remember those McNamara brothers? The sons of the officer who worked on McDuff's case back in '66. They're both U.S. Marshals now, and they are determined to catch McDuff. They know he's behind it, but they need proof. Then someone comes forward, another accomplice, Alva Worley. He tells them about seeing McDuff kidnap and kill a woman named Colleen Reed.
This changes everything, because now there's a pattern. The way Reed was kidnapped, killed, it's almost identical to the Valencia Joshua case. Now they can build a case against McDuff.
But catching him wouldn't be easy. He was good at disappearing, and there was no physical evidence tying him to Melissa Northrup. That's the other missing woman. They had Worley's testimony. But he wasn't exactly the most reliable guy.
It was a tough one for the prosecution. They had to get creative. They tracked McDuff's every move the night Northrup disappeared, used witness statements, pieced together a timeline. They also focused on his violent past to show that he was capable of doing this again.
And then McDuff screws up big time. He decides to testify against his lawyer's advice. He thinks he can fool the jury, outsmart everyone, but he ends up admitting he was at the crime scene.
That was it, the turning point. McDuff's ego, his arrogance, it all backfired on him.
Everyone's on edge as the jury deliberates. And finally, the verdict, guilty. McDuff gets his second death sentence, and this time, there's no escape.
This wasn't just about Melissa Northrup. It was about holding McDuff accountable for all the terror he caused, making sure the system as flawed as it is, wouldn't let him get away with it again.
But even with the death sentence looming, McDuff had one last trick up his sleeve, just weeks before his execution. He confesses to Colleen Reed's murder, tells them where her body is. Why? Was he feeling guilty? Or was it one last attempt to control things, even from death row?
It's a question that haunts everyone. Investigators, the families of his victims, a chilling reminder that some criminals will never truly understand them.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, was there any part of him that felt bad, or was it all just, messed up? It's hard to say for sure, but here's the thing. The story doesn't end there. Remember that empty grave they found? The one near where Valencia Joshua was buried?
Yeah, that was creepy. What was the deal with that?
It was a total shock. Made everyone think, like, how many more victims could there be? It was a reminder that we might never know the whole truth about McDuff.
It's scary to think about. But aside from, the victims and their families, McDuff's case really exposed some problems in the system. Like, it showed how someone so dangerous could get out of prison. Totally. His case made a lot of people angry. They were furious that he was ever let out. The Texas legislature had to do something, and they did.
So what did they change?
Well, they made it way harder to get parole, especially for violent criminals. And they put stricter rules in place for parole reviews, so they'd look at cases like McDuff's much more carefully.
And there was also that big prison construction program, right? Was that part of it too?
Yeah, that was a direct result of McDuff. Texas realized they needed more prisons to keep dangerous guys locked up. They didn't want to let people out just because the prisons were too full.
It's amazing how one guy's actions could change the whole system.
Yeah, that's what happens sometimes with these big cases. They force us to look at the hard truths. And sometimes that leads to real change.
Let's talk about McDuff himself for a minute. We've talked about the facts, the trial, the system, but what about the man behind it all? Why did he do these awful things?
That's the big question, right? And there's no easy answer. Some experts think he was a psychopath. No empathy, just this need for power and control.
It makes sense. He liked scaring people, especially the ones he worked with. I remember Roy Green said he was a bully, always using threats to get what he wanted.
You're right, and that's how he was his whole life. Even in prison, he was manipulative and controlling. He liked to cause trouble.
But some people think his childhood was a factor too, like his mother always defending him no matter what. Could that have messed him up?
It's possible. What happens to us when we're young can affect us a lot. Maybe his upbringing made him violent.
Nature versus nurture, right? We may never know for sure. But Kenneth McDuff was definitely shaped by his past, and his story is a warning about what can happen when evil is ignored.
And it shows us that evil can look normal. McDuff wasn't some creepy guy hiding in the shadows. He was just a regular person. That's what makes it so scary.
Exactly. He went to college, had jobs, talked to people every day, but underneath it all, there was this darkness.
Yeah, that's what makes his case so disturbing. You think you can spot evil, but sometimes it's right there in front of you.
So, where does that leave us? We've looked at the facts, the trial, even McDuff's mind. But have we really figured it all out?
I don't think so. McDuff's case stays with you. It makes you think about things. About evil, about justice, about all the unanswered questions.
McDuff was executed in 1998. His reign of terror finally ended. But the pain he caused still lingers. The families of his victims, the communities he terrorized, they're still dealing with it all.
And the debate about the death penalty, which McDuff's case was a part of, is still going on. His story reminds us how complicated punishment is, and how we're still trying to figure out the right balance between revenge and rehabilitation.
It's a conversation we need to keep having. We have to learn from cases like McDuff's, look at our systems, question our beliefs, and fight for a better justice system.
Exactly. It's not enough to just sit back and hope for the best. We have to be involved in creating a better, fairer society. We all have a part to play.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. It really makes you appreciate these deep dives, They force us to look at the dark stuff and ask ourselves how we can make things better.
Absolutely. And with McDuff, there are still so many questions. Like those missing people and that empty grave near Valencia Joshua. I can't get that out of my head.
Me neither. And McDuff himself, he hinted at other murders but never gave any details. It's like he wanted to die with those secrets, leave everyone wondering.
That's a good point. Makes you wonder if those confessions, even the one about Colleen Reed, were real or just him trying to control things one last time.
So after all this, what do we make of it all? Where do we go from here? We saw how the system failed, how a dangerous guy was allowed to hurt people. We even tried to understand his mind. But are there any lessons we can learn from all of this?
I think one big lesson is to always be aware. McDuff got away with so much because he blended in. He seemed normal. It shows us how important it is to pay attention, to trust our gut feelings, and to speak up if something feels wrong.
Yeah, that's huge. We have to look out for each other, not be afraid to say something. If you see something, say something, right?
Right. And it shows how we need to hold the justice system accountable.
Yeah.
Push for changes so this doesn't happen again. Talk to our leaders. Demand better.
It's not enough to just hope things will get better. We have to make it happen. We all have to do our part.
I think you're right. And, as awful as McDuff's story is, it also shows how strong people can be. The families of his victims, they never gave up fighting for justice, for answers, for a world where these horrible things don't happen.
Their strength is amazing. So as we finish this deep dive into the case of Kenneth McDuff, I want to leave you with this. What will you take away from this? Will you just forget about it? Or will you let it change you, make you more aware, more active? It's your choice.